Welcome to another episode of Chad's Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Chax Training and Consulting. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, there are sponsorship opportunities available. So just reach out to one of us so we can discuss that in more detail. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as Director of Training Solutions and Principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am Director of Media Productions here at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are also certified by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals as accessible document specialists. And in fact, today on LinkedIn, there was a post. If you're not following us on LinkedIn, just reach out and follow us, or, send us a message. But somebody had made a post about, hey, do you think the ADS test is worth it? Where can I go get some training? And so someone had mentioned the fact that I helped create some stuff for Site Improved. And then Site Improve actually has an ADS study course, which I didn't work on, but they have. And then they mentioned us. And I said, well, we really can't provide specific training to the course to the ADS test because we helped develop it would be an unfair advantage. But Understanding Tags Tree Basics is a great class that we teach that is a great way to kind of understand accessibility and writing alt text. And several of the other classes talk about accessibility principles that you're definitely going to need to know. But if you're interested, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications to look at the IAAP stuff. They have some sample questions and stuff there too, Chad. And you and I actually did create the 40 videos as part of their study course for IAAP, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's something, I think we should certainly mention that IAAP has about 40 videos on, general knowledge about the ADS, right, that we did create for them. So, and Dax, I think it's worth mentioning. I mean, you and I have been through several certifications in our careers, right? I mean, yep. I've taken the Adobe Certified Expert, Adobe Certified Instructor, Accessible Document Specialist. And what I will say, these tests can be frustrating. I remember on the Adobe exams reading these questions and I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? You know what I mean? And so then being on the other side of things, right? So then being on the side of writing the questions, which right. I actually did for Adobe as well. Writing questions is really hard. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not an easy task. And so, forgive us, if some of the questions seem a little bit obscure, but we were writing questions to meet a specific objective, right? When we were assigned the task, they had objectives that they wanted to meet. These are things we need these test takers to know. And so then you have to kind of reverse engineer the process and then come up with a question that's going to pull it out of them. So one of the things I've always said, I mean, the good news is these are all multiple choice questions.
Right.
So a good approach is process of elimination, right? Yeah. Eliminate the questions that are absolutely not right. And that'll help you to kind of reduce your options. And then hopefully from there, you could be like, okay, this one makes the most sense,
Well, and, the test is geared for people with 1 to 2 years experience. So,
true.
You really should have a good knowledge. This is not a test you take if you're like, oh, I started accessibility earlier this year and I want to get a certification now. It is something you're going to need some real world experience to understand. In fact, there's a little bit of a vetting process that goes on in order to even take the test. So just be prepared for that. And, I will tell you, we did 3-hour sessions coming up with the questions, and we got through in 3 hours, maybe 5 6 questions. So guys, it takes a bit. I mean, it is definitely they were well thought out questions, and it was almost like you had to sit and defend your question when it came up. Like, okay, why did we come up with these answers, and what was the ramification for it, and what could be, are we answering this question in a way that is most accessible so people aren't going saying, which one of these isn't the right question, the right answer, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, all of that to say, guys, the ADS test, I am seeing more and more job descriptions on LinkedIn that reference ADS and WAS and CPAC. So it is definitely worth it. Someone had posted in our Facebook group, our PDF accessibility Facebook group, which is now almost 3,000 people. Is it worth taking this test? And I will tell you that, it definitely, if it's going to help you get a job and prove that you know what you're talking about, it is definitely worth it.
Yeah. And in the past, Dax, I've had a lot of people ask me, and again, this applies to the Adobe exams as well. People would say, what's the best way to study, for this exam? And my answer was always use the product, right. Actually do the work, that's the best way, because otherwise, there's a term that I've heard people use called a paper tiger. Which is essentially somebody who's just really good at taking tests. And sure, you could pass the test, but you also need to be able to do the work. So use of the product, remediating documents, probably the best way for you to be able to pass that exam.
Well, I will tell you, Chad, before we move on to the next topic, I will tell you that for those of you who are listening to us going, oh, these are instructors, you think of us as instructors. We are in those documents every single day because I never want to be only an instructor, because I feel like the moment that you stop remediating is the moment you start becoming obsolete. You really have to have a continued experience to understand everything. And honestly, I learn new stuff every single day, new ways to do things, new properties to implement, and you're just always learning. But yeah, so enough on that topic.
So I wanted to talk about something on the PDF accessibility Facebook group. It was Victoria who kind of called me out, and in a good way. I'm not saying this in a bad way, but she kind of called me out in that she said in one of the previous podcasts, you said that it took you 20 minutes to remediate a document. And, if she was confused by that statement, I'm sure other people were as well. And I just wanted to kind of clear that up, what I was referring to. The client in which I was talking about, one of the things I want to point out is that I provided training for them.
Right.
And I instructed them on the proper way to prepare documents. Right. And and as many of you know, I mean, most of these documents are done in InDesign because it's a design team. Most of you know that InDesign, for the most part, is never going to create a fully standards compliant file, right? And so when I say it takes me 20 minutes, I want to point out that most of these files are 1 to 4 pages. And because the users have done everything that I instructed them to do, my job of completing remediation takes a relatively short amount of time.
We also have tools, Chad. We're using tools.
Absolutely.
We're using Access PDF, and we're using Common Look, and we're using other programs, Callus and other programs, to be able to do things faster. I sent out a proposal for a quote for someone wanted to do some training with us. It was 2 days worth of training. We give them a nice proposal. It's all put together with all the, what we offer and how much it is and all of that. So it's got a table and several paragraphs, the InDesign documents all set, but there's a few things that I always have to do. Literally, I take that 4-page document, open it in Access PDF. I press 6 buttons. I change one property from inline to block, or from block to inline, and then I'm done. And it takes all of 30 seconds, maybe a minute to do, because I'm using that tool. If I had to do it manually, that same task might take me 15 minutes to go through and do all of that stuff. So, Chad, I would like to do something for our listeners here. We've done this before. We have a level of effort matrix. It's a table that has all these different columns in it. And it starts with basic and intermediate and, advanced and, worst case scenario in each of the columns. And then on the left-hand side in each of the rows, it has things like tables and headings and images and figures and formulas. And it basically gives you a kind of a bingo card of how bad is my document and how time should it take me given how many things are right or wrong with the document. So if you're listening to this podcast, reach out to us on LinkedIn. We don't offer this as a download, but reach out to us on LinkedIn and ask for the level of effort matrix, and we'll send it to you. It's a PDF, and it's a great way for you to go, oh, okay, this document has 1 million tables, no alt text. It's got formulas and all this stuff. That document's not going to take 20 minutes. That document's going to take a good hour or two. But a document that's just got several headings and maybe it's missing some alt text, that's going to be more in the 15, 20 minute range. So reach out to us.
Right. So, most of the documents, that the users have put in the effort. And so I am just kind of taking it to the finish line. Now, that being said, I got a 4-page document the other day that was not tagged, right? It was probably a new user, wasn't in the training that I provided. That took an hour and a half. Right. So I just wanted to clear things up for Victoria and for anybody else who was like, oh my gosh, he's doing it in 20 minutes. I was generalizing there, but also, as Dax pointed out, I'm using Made to Tag. I'm using Access PDF. I'm using Access Word. We have leveraged third-party tools to make our jobs easier, right? There was a time when all I was using was Acrobat. And when I discovered these tools, I was like, oh my gosh, my life has changed, So anyway, I just wanted to clear things up. So Victoria, I hope that helps.
Awesome. Well, today, Chad, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we wanted to talk today about 5 ways to get your team on board with accessibility, right? We know that this is a challenge for everyone. It's probably one of the more frequent questions we get asked. Right, Dax? How do you get how do I get my team? And it's so interesting. It's because it's such a hard thing, right? Because you get on, you get bit by the accessibility bug, right? You are now impassioned and you want everything to be accessible and you're so excited about accessibility. And then you try to go talk to your team and you start telling them all the things that are wrong with their documents and how it needs to be accessible. And everybody just looks at you like you're Sheldon Cooper. And I have been called the Sheldon Cooper of accessibility. It's Heimer too. So today we're going to talk about 5 ways to get your team on board. And it starts with awareness, right, Chad? Yeah. Yep, absolutely. The first thing is starting with awareness by asking, did you know how this works for screen reader users? This is really a poignant step in the process, in my opinion, because even from a training standpoint, Dax, I think we've both realized that, in the beginning, we just kind of dove in with accessibility, be like, okay, let's apply tags. Let's do this. We got to do this. We got to do that. And, a lot of times we get the deer in the headlights, right? Because we missed the most obvious thing that the user needs to know, and that is why. Right. And a lot of them have like a general understanding. They're like, oh, I understand people with disabilities need this. Right. But when you show them with a screen reader, it really makes that light bulb go off. And they're like, oh, wow, this is how, some users consume this information.
Well, most people aren't when you're learning accessibility or you're trying to implement accessibility, you understand the technical aspect of it, right? But the other person who's just trying to do their job, they don't have all that technical background. And when you start coming at them with, you need to set your tags to do this, and you need to start to, and you start getting all technical, literally, like you said, deer in the headlights, they get this look of panic where they're like, this is way too much. And I will tell you, when I was at Jacobs Engineering, there was someone there who I am so proud of, because in the beginning, her answer was, I don't do accessibility. I do InDesign, but I don't do that accessibility stuff. And I said, okay. And at first I was like, I want to shake them, you know? And it's like when someone says, oh, that's not my job, you know? Which is a pet peeve of mine, going back to my fast food days, right? But one day I went, did you know how to set alt text? And she's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you just go right here, or I think it was actually I'm going to say that again. One day I said, you know that you can just set this one property and it sets the headings for your document. She's like, what? And I opened up the styles panel and showed her at the drop down at the bottom that you just change it to H1 or H2 or whatever. And she was like, oh, I didn't know it was that easy. And then I showed her a little bit more. And I will tell you, she is now an accessibility champion. And I am so proud of how far she's come. But it just started with that little thing. The barrier was up initially, right? But when we start breaking it down to simple things, it's much better. But going back to what we were talking about here, screen reader users, when you can show someone how something works with a screen reader, it is such a powerful methodology. But, Chad, you and I hear this all the time on our Facebook group. People ask the question, how does this sound to a person using assistive technology? And those are remediators. So we offer a class, document testing with NVDA, for those screen reader users, for those document remediators, so that they have a better understanding of how to use a screen reader. Because oftentimes we don't bring up hey, did you know how this sounds to someone using a screen reader? Because we don't feel confident enough ourselves to actually show them. Right. And so I think, as you said, it's a key step. Absolutely. One of the other things that you can do is, I have an app, and you have this app on your phone too, a colorblind simulator on your phone. And I don't know how many times I pulled it out in board meetings where we're doing conceptual planning for the next brochure or proposal. And someone pulls out last year's and said, okay, we're going to start with this. And I say, wait a minute. And I pull out my phone, I open my colorblind simulator, and I hold it over the graphic, and immediately the camera shows how it looks to someone who might be colorblind. And all of a sudden everybody goes, oh. But that same conversation, if I were just to start talking about the rules of color contrast and the use of color only and all that other technical stuff, people would be much less receptive to understanding the impact of accessibility, right, Chad?
Yeah. And what is that app that you use, Dax?
So I use one called Daltonizer, and that's for Windows. And then there's one for Mac called daltonizer.
Well, didn't you say you brought up one on your phone?
Yeah. Daltonizer is on my phone.
Oh, Daltonizer. Okay.
Yeah. So you have to allow your camera, you have to allow it to use your camera, right? And then I can hold my camera up and it shows me a split screen of what it looks like for someone with protanopia and what it looks like for someone with normal vision. And I can change some of those settings and show them, different colorblind models. But yeah, it's a really easy, great way to just bring awareness, right? Because the first step, to reiterate, is really bringing about that awareness, right? I see Chad's, you guys can't see it, but Chad's got his phone open and he's testing everything. I am probably colorblind. Am I colorblind friendly, Chad? I don't know. You're holding the camera toward me. You are pretty colorblind friendly.
Yeah. Like I really could make everything out. And I mean, you had said, which was the app that you said you use?
I use one called Daltonizer. Daltonizer. Yeah.
Okay. There is so we mentioned SimDaltonism, which is a Mac application, but there's also an iPhone app called SimDaltonism as well. Right. That you can use on your phone. Sure.
And guys, these apps are on your phone, but they're also available on your desktop too. So, there's been plenty of times where Chad and I have been in a presentation and we pull open the overlay that shows a screen reader simulation, and we can show people right there what it looks like, in colorblind mode. And Illustrator and Photoshop both have colorblind proof previews to show you what it looks like in colorblind mode, right? The other thing you can do is you can bring up articles that help tell the story of accessibility, right? Harvard, this has been a bit, but Harvard got sued because their entire video library didn't have captions. But if your organization is struggling with captions, it might be worth pulling up that old article and saying, look, here's what happened to them. And maybe we should be thinking about this more seriously, or, pull open an article on 5 ways to improve captions, or, some helpful tip or tool that can start bringing awareness to the impact of captions, not just for people who are deaf, but also people who use social media in common areas where they don't want to hear the audio. They'd rather have you get an increased engagement when you have captions on your videos, period. So the first step here is starting with awareness and really just trying to get the buy-in of, do you understand, or can I show you what the issue is, right?
The second one is demonstrate easy wins, right? So,
right.
The process of accessibility can, on the outset, it can seem overwhelming. So don't tackle it as like this behemoth. Go for the easy wins, right? So alt text in Word, in PowerPoint, in InDesign is super, super easy to add. Right. So every image, every chart, every graph, it's pretty much a right click in any of those applications, and you can add the alt text. So, and then provide a little bit of instruction on writing effective alternate text. Dax, you and I do a webinar on that topic specifically, right? And then use brand colors or a template to get started. Templates are a huge win. Right. So, you as the accessibility champion, build out some templates that are already incorporating a lot of the accessibility components. Right. And you could do this in Word, PowerPoint, InDesign. Right. No issue there. And you can do things like in the case of Word and InDesign, define your heading styles. Right. So that when somebody's writing content, they just say, oh, this is a heading 1, this is a heading 2, and it looks the way they're expecting it to look.
So, talking about headings, Chad, we talk about making things easy. Imagine what they're doing right now. If someone's in a Word document and they want to make something a heading, or they want to make it look like a heading, what do they have to do? They highlight it, go over and make it bold, and then they're going to increase the font 2 or 3 times right there. That's like 4 key presses already, right? So show them the easy win by saying, look, if you use a template, it's 1 click. You literally just click the heading level 1 and it's done. Right. And that's a super easy way. It saves time, because I think if you get too far in the weeds with trying to tell them about heading structure and order and, not skipping and all the things that we talk about when we talk about heading structure, the technical end starts to get complicated. Just here's how I can save you time and make it accessible.
Well, and here's an idea. I mean, you could even approach headings and not even mention accessibility. Right. You could just approach headings as, let me show you a super efficient way to format text in your document.
Yeah.
Here's a heading 1 style. Here's a heading 2 style. Here's a body style. Done. Right. Yep. You don't even need to explain the accessibility. Just say, I want you to use these heading styles. And what they're going to find out is that, the problem with what you described of highlighting text, clicking bold, bumping up the size, is that I promise you it's going to be inconsistent.
Oh, right? For sure. I
run into it all the time because you and I have to go into these documents and incorporate consistency. And by doing so, it often causes reflow because how it was formatted originally was not consistent in the first place. So
I don't know how many I don't know how many documents I've gotten where some of the headings are 16 point and some of the headings are 17 point and some of the headings are 18 point. And it's like, come on, guys, can we just pick one or two? And styles take care of all of that. And you can use your brand style guideline as a defensible shield and say, look, we need to be on brand. And these are the colors that we need to use. And these are the fonts and the headings. And we're going to build it all in to make it super easy for you so you don't have to think about it. Right. And so I think that all of that is all about helping the end user save time. And when you approach it that way, then it makes it more digestible. Right.
Yeah. And I'll just add to the brand colors. Make sure your brand colors are colorblind friendly.
Yep. And if your brand, go ahead.
I was teaching a class one time and they're like, we just had a huge rebranding done. Can you check the colors for us? And I did. And I was like, it was like,
well, most of the time I see the colors where they have yellow. If you have yellow as part of your brand color or gray as part of your brand color, you really need to be creative about how you use those, because any text with yellow must be on a darker background. Yellow on white is almost impossible. Orange on white is almost impossible. If you're listening right now and your Togos or your Subway and you're yellow and orange, those are really tough colors to make compliant. The last part about this demonstrating easy wins is just showing them, hey, look, if you just click this, it's done, right? And if you don't, here's the other 5 things I now have to do to go clean up this document. And sometimes just showing them, hey, look, here's the effect that you not doing this is important, which leads us to our next point, which is item number 3, which is talk about time. Right. Mm-hmm. So you really should. We get this question all the time. How do I convince my boss I need this tool or I to get me the training I need? And the answer is always track your time. If you're not tracking, even just generally, how much time you're spending doing the minutia, fixing headings, setting alt text, things that other people could be doing along the way as they design the document, that is a great way to be able to go back and have a defensible kind of report and say, you know what, for the past 6 months, I've been tracking my time and I've spent 16 hours fixing headings and adding alt text. That is a huge influencer to be able to get either buy-in to start implementing training company-wide or to get the tools you need to do it faster. Track your time, guys. Absolutely.
And it comes down to ROI, right? I mean, return on investment. And, the other thing I'm going to bring up, and of course, Dax, you and I are biased because we are trainers, right? Right. But we often get people who are like, oh man, we can't afford, and guys, we are not like, we are not like skyscraper expensive. I feel like we're pretty reasonable, but people are like, oh, we can't afford training. But if you do this ROI, if you track the time and you're like, listen, I'm spending 18 hours a week fixing this problem, you could justify and one of the things you had mentioned, actually the next topic is hold lunch and learns, right? Right. So if you don't want to hold the lunch and learns, give Dax and I a call. We could definitely provide that, for you. And a 1 hour training can really go a long way because, we could just go over a lot of these things that will help just make those documents cleaner and make the process of making them accessible a lot easier.
Well, and offering some treats now and again to get people to those lunch and learns is a great way to kind of get people in the door. Donuts help. Pizza helps, right? I mean, influence with food when all else fails. Carbs are your friend. But, the holding these little lunch and learns can teach people kind of concept at a time, right? Yeah. It's really focusing on just one thing. Hey guys, here's 3 ways that you can write alt text. Boom, boom, boom. And, some accessibility is better than no. Get them going on something small. How to use the styles panel. even just a lunch and learn on these are our brand colors and this is where you go to get them, or here's how you use our PowerPoint template, right? I see people all the time where they will provide a template, but it's really not a template. It's just a PowerPoint with a bunch of slides already pre-designed, but they didn't use the actual template part of PowerPoint. And I just kind of shake my head and go, oh yeah, that's not quite it, right? I mean, it gets them farther down the road, and you get a consistent look on your slides. But when you try to export that for accessibility, it tends to you get problems, right? So go ahead.
What's often a big eye opener when you do templates, especially like a Word template, when you show them how to use heading styles, and when you use that heading style, it automatically adds the extra space above the heading.
Oh yeah.
So that they don't have to put an extra return in there.
Yep.
Their minds are blown. They're like, wait, how did it do that? How does it know to put that extra space in there? Like, that's what a style does, you know?
Space before and space after. I will tell you,
best feature ever.
It is literally probably the most underused feature ever. Space before and space after, right?
Yeah.
And finally, guys, the last thing I want to leave you with, and this is most important. If you've held on this long, I want to give you the best one last. Engage, don't complain, right? You really need to provide solutions when you point out issues, because there is nothing more deflating than walking up to someone who's designed something and say, hey, that's not compliant. And then like, what do you mean? And then you say, well, it doesn't meet it violates the use of color only or info really. You start going into the technical end and they just look at you and they just want to throw you out a window. If you walk up and say, hey, that's a really great design. If you were to change just this one little thing or make that color just a little bit darker, it would make it more readable for people and it would meet accessibility compliance, right? All of a sudden, they're much more apt to listen to what you have to say. Hey, that's a great table, but here's a way we could make this more accessible and it's going to be easier to read, because most accessibility requires you to really think about how you're designing, and the end result is that it's easier to understand for everyone. So provide solutions when you go to critique someone's approach, rather than just simply telling them what's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's that phrase? You catch more flies with honey?
Yeah, that's it. That is it. You catch more flies with honey. That is for sure.
So, within that category, keep track of recurring roadblocks and plan extra enrichment, right? So, as you're going through the process, try to identify like where you're encountering a hurdle, right? Like you're consistently running into this problem. Here's a great example. I run into this all the time in InDesign, where people create a bulleted list and map it to a P tag. Right. And it's wrong, right? I mean, info and relationships, right? I mean, it is a list. It should be tagged as a list, but when you tag it as a P, you're kind of like breaking it, right? I mean, InDesign wants to help you by setting it to automatic, but when you map it to a P, they're incorrectly tagged. So just identify those and bring it up at a lunch and learn. Be like, hey guys, you guys are doing great at creating these bulleted lists. However, do not map them to a P tag. Just keep them set to automatic. Word, you don't run into that issue so much, but I guess in Word, the guidance would be teach them how to create a multi-level list. That would be a good takeaway, for that.
Or to use standard bullets, right?
Yeah.
Not using the hollow circle that's a default, because hollow circle voices as the letter O. So we've covered that on plenty of different podcasts before, but just those little tidbits that they can, if you find you're coming into those roadblocks over and over again, that's where you perfect time to plan a lunch and learn, or create a handout that just addresses that one single topic, or an email, or however it is that you're distributing that information. It just makes it easier when you can promote things that are relevant and quick, right? And last, I just mentioned it, providing checklists, support documents, or videos is your final way to really kind of get that information out. So we start with awareness. We get them understanding what it is that accessibility and how accessibility affects the way people digest information. We want to demonstrate those easy wins, start getting them succeeding and showing if we're just doing these quick things, it doesn't add a lot of time to our project, right? And then defend where you are by tracking your time and talk about, how long it takes to do some of this stuff. And if you just simply follow a few key things, you could save, 30%, 50% on a project. I mean, that's all really relevant. Fourth, hold that lunch and learn and provide that training for those easy concepts. I mean, that's really going to get great buy-in. And finally, engage, but without complaining. And you're going to find that you're going to be received much easier. It's still not going to be like everybody. It's not a magic wand. It's not everybody's just all of a sudden going to say, kumbaya, let's all do this. But you're going to get a lot farther along, and providing checklists and support materials, templates, documents, videos. Chad and I have so many checklists. If you go to our chaxchat.com and in the menu, there's kind of it's not really super prominent, but we have a kind of a menu on there, and then your mobile phone, it's in the middle, but on the website, I think it's also in the middle. But there are several different checklists that you can download from us. And if you need custom ones, we can help you develop those too. And there's plenty of YouTube videos, and Chad and I are always releasing new videos on our YouTube channel on Accessibility Unraveled, or you can go to our website, accessibilityunraveled.com. There's plenty of resources out there, and we can help you find them. Reach out to us on LinkedIn and just ask us. We have the information there for you guys.
So, ultimately, my recommendation is baby steps. Yep. Right? Like, don't look at this process as this daunting task, right? I mean, that will come in time. But, again, I'm going to reference Jeremy Setta's analogy that he gave when he was on our podcast, when he said, like in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if you can improve your position by 1%, you've improved your position, right? Yep. And then from there, you could go for 2%. And then maybe 3%. So apply that to accessibility, right? Don't look at this as this daunting task. Baby steps. What we just gave you. We gave you some guidance on, demonstrate the easy wins. What are some easy things I can have my people do that are going to pay big dividends, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I hope you got a lot out of this session today, guys, this podcast. I feel like this is a good thing. We may revisit this in a different way coming up. So, stay tuned. We might put this together in a webinar. I think that'd be good information. Don't you, Chad?
I do. I think that'd be cool. Yeah. Be fun too.
Awesome.
And just a reminder, guys, we have 3 upcoming classes that are coming up in the next month. On September 1st, we have document testing with NVDA. On September 6th, we have InDesign accessibility best practices. And on September 15th, we have designing with accessibility in mind.
I'm actually really excited about the InDesign best practices class, Chad, because we're giving away $450 worth of plugins for InDesign for everyone that shows up to the class. So it's
that's all of your scripts.
Yeah, those are all of my scripts on, well, not all of them, but a good majority of them on writing alt text. It's going to allow you to inject alt text across your entire document in one shot, and a color contrast validator that allows you to analyze your entire document for color contrast without having to copy and paste values anywhere. It just sucks it right out of your document and creates a really nice presentation so you can look at it and figure out what color combinations are going to meet color contrast. So I'm excited about giving those away.
All right, guys. Well, once again, we want to thank Chax Training and Consulting for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Just a reminder, if you're looking for in-person or online training or struggling to establish an accessibility program within your organization, head over to accessibilityunraveled.com. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.